welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast for November 15th, 2025. My name is Tom Luongo. We have a lot to talk about. It is episode 238, and I have with me the great pleasure, as always, of bringing back my good friend and compatriot, Vince Lanci. Vince, how are you?
Great, Tom. Good to see you again, and good to hear your voice.
It is absolutely great to catch up with you because the other day I get it. So for those of you who don't know, Vince and I have we text back and forth all the time. And on I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday morning of this week, so earlier in the week, Vince texts me with a little note about what he's seeing, and I'm like, dude, that has to be a podcast. And I'm not going to talk, and I want to get this done as quickly as possible because I don't want to like spill the beans and then have people think that this is my idea, because it's not. This is all Vince blew my freaking mind at like 7:30 in the morning on a Tuesday, and I'm like, I'm not even caffeinated yet, and I'm like, oh yes, the world has now fundamentally and finally changed. So what am I fucking talking about? You're about to find out. So, this has to do with all the stuff that Vince and I have been talking about since the first time I had him on the podcast, or not maybe the first time, but goes all the way back to that episode that we keep referring to, Vince, which is the one where we outlined the idea that the COMEX was being depreciated as a currency speculating instrument, and returning to
a spot market.
A proper commodities future market for gold, for silver. And that episode is episode one. I will get the episode number. It's called Vince Lanci and Gold is the New Black. That is the name of the episode. I will get you the episode number, and I'll have it in the show notes. So Vince, tell me where we are now. Why are we where we are, and what did you note the other day that blew both of our minds?
Right. So quickly, whenever Tom and I have ideas, whether it be an idea that I want to make sure it isn't crazy, or an idea that he wants to voice or practice, before he airs it publicly, we'll send him back and forth. Mostly it's me sending voice notes saying, I think this, is that crazy? And then it'll be Tom and I talking on the phone and him telling me why I'm not crazy. And then, of course, it turns into like 20-minute conversations where we go back and forth. But the one that started this yesterday was, innocently enough, China just did. These are the two factual points that made me connect dots that I hadn't connected before. The first one is China just did a US dollar bond auction, and it went very well, right?
Yep.
Right.
And interestingly enough, the whole what I would like to call zero hedge set kept saying, "Oh, look, see, it's the end of the dollar." It went off 5 or 7 basis points lower than the U.S. Treasury rate, and all of those guys like missed the friggin' boat completely. But I'm sorry, as always, the slop never stops, because we are where we are in this.
I mean, just without digressing too much. Yeah, the neo-Keynesian mindset, and of which we all are a part of, or the ethnocentric nationalist mindset, cannot accept that China's bonds are being viewed in a similar risk to the U.S. And so we've got other reasons for it. Oh, well, that didn't matter, or this didn't matter. Well, anyway, it's all bullshit. We have to accept some reality once in a while. You have to, when you're in a losing trade, you see the money going down, it's a losing trade, and you get out. So, but people don't do that because their personalities are tied to it. The second data point that made me actually make the call was Russia announced. It could be bullshit, right? But Russia announced that they're going to do yuan-denominated bonds, and I went, wait a minute. So a million different things ran through my head, but the two that I shared with Tom were the following. I have suspected for a while that the U.S. and China, and I don't include Russia in the conversation, but I think Tom will a little bit, because they have to know what's going on, that the U.S. and China are coordinating a global divorce. At best, it's a prisoner's dilemma where they're still competing and they're trying not to upset each other's apple carts too much. At worst, we're enemies that are just trying to make sure we don't kill the whole world. So a Cold War concept. And some of the evidence that I have put forth to that effect was, I noticed that when you like, for example, when China's buying its most gold, the U.S. is not buying. when the US is buying its most gold, China is not buying. So look, when you're two big players, you don't want to compete with each other.
Right.
Right. So they see that, and that's not just random. I see that pattern in other China satellites. India doesn't buy gold when China buys. Again, I'm sorry.
No, what I was going to say, Vince, is that if you want to de-escalate what has clearly been a relationship that has been kind of forced into escalation. Remember, during the Biden administration, the foreign policy of the Biden junta, sorry, I called it the Biden administration, and I won't do that again. The Biden junta, the whole point of this was to accelerate the enmity between the United States and isolate it even further away from Russia and China both. I mean, we go back to the first foreign policy meeting held by Anthony Blinken's State Department. It was to invite China to Anchorage, Alaska, and then they just thrust them down and treated them like the help. Right. And it was a terrible moment. It was maybe a low point in the U.S. foreign policy, given the circumstances. And so understand now you have to always ask the question, who benefits from setting the United States and China against each other? Who benefits from keeping the United States and Russia at odds with each other forever and a day? Well, it's whoever isn't losing at the table. And I still, when I sit down to play a 6-player game of something vicious, I don't care if it's, I talk about Dune all the time, but I could be playing a game of freaking Power Grid, for Christ's sake, which isn't even that nasty a game. You always have to analyze the game board from the perspective of who's in the lead, who's in second, and where you are. And if you're in fourth place, your goal is to set first and second place against each other in order to slow them down so that you can catch up. This is not 4D chess, folks. This is basic everyday what you do to survive when you're in, this is just basic strategic analysis. And it pisses me off that we live in a world now where this kind of analysis is immediately turned into 4D chess, because of course the intelligence slop agencies are now turning 4D chess into the new conspiracy theory. It's the same bullshit. It's the same corruption of language in order to create this situation. So now, having hijacked Vince's
no, we're going to go back and forth.
This is really important, because to understand that the United States and Russia and the Chinese have to build trust with each other if there's going to be a foundation of trust that they can work on. And handing the gold market back and forth to each other, this is my point, handing the gold market back and forth as they drain London is a measure of in which they're creating trust. You get to buy at the best price. I get to buy at a good price. Right. You want to buy at this price? I will set it up for you to buy at that price, and back and forth. And who gets fucked? The guy who's been sitting in the middle the entire time. The LDM.
Right. So let me take the ball back from you on that.
Sure.
So I think what's unique is that when you look at the world through different lenses. So it's rude to speak this way, but I'm going to say, as if you weren't here, Tom will look at things geopolitically, and he can look at and find out what the UK or the Europe benefits or who loses, and he's very simple cui bono type of stuff. And when you do that, you avoid the 4D chess machinations. You avoid the overanalyzing, because ultimately we are all creatures of what's best for us. And so cui bono. And if you go from that premise rather than from going, the chart says this, the data says that, you find out that the chart and the data will either confirm or contradict your initial thesis. So inductive versus deductive reasoning. And the reason I'm phrasing it, and
then you wind up with also confounding variables, which are then inserted into the zeitgeist on purpose in order to lead you into the wrong direction, which is what the intelligence agencies do, and they do it across every idiom, every information vertical.
No, but what your approach is actually harder, I think, to do, and this is not a compliment, because your approach can if done improperly, we'll call that it's like grassroots out. I look at it as grassroots out. So meaning who benefits, and then you just go out and you look for information, and that's hard for me to do as an approach, because I will latch onto an alphabet agency's information and treat it like it's authentic. So I'll get lost. So what works for me in coming to similar conclusions to you is that I look at markets and market structure, and I go, I wouldn't call it top down. I'd go markets to intent. So I would say
Yes.
this, and this happens. It hurts the U.S. It helps this guy. Well, and I don't see the intent until it's over. And I say, wait a minute, either this is all random or gold goes down every day at 8 a.m. That type of shit. Yeah.
And
So,
I go, I wonder
right.
why.
Either this is random or the UK get benefits from everything that's going on geopolitically in the Middle East. And that's where Tom says, well, Vince, it's not random. So and then we get into it. But I think what Tom and I say from different perspectives is this. I see the US, back to the US and China. I see the US and China as trying, maybe it's half-heartedly, but recognizing that the economic engine of the world will no longer sustain the world in its current force, and that China and the US both have equal stakes in the world not blowing up. And Russia is not a small player in this. So when I say China, I implied the China-Russia dyad there, China-Russia combo. And on a bad day, we're arguing in this divorce, we're arguing over who gets what. And on a good day, we're just taking turns going in and getting our furniture out of the house while the other spouse is away. But the thing is, and this is what right? This is what I'm talking divorce here, right? Obviously, what's on my mind? Who do I have to talk to in therapy? Well, that's what happens when you marry a narcissist. But anyway, um, um, okay. So in me looking at this relationship, see, this is where I come up with this concept that I have to call Tom when I go this and this. So for example, China buys gold, the U.S. doesn't. The U.S. buys gold, China doesn't. China's releasing does a U.S. dollar bond. It does really well. It's not the cure for cancer, but it does really well. Russia announces a yuan bond, and I just make the joke to myself. I go, wait a minute. China's getting liquidity in dollars from the US, and Russia's getting liquidity from China in yuan. And I just look at it as a big circle, and it's all the same bond market again. One way or another, everybody's liquidity is tied together. So whether you fucking like it or not, China needs to use US dollars. They will continue to do that and use it as a staple. And Russia, which can't use US dollars, is now using China as their banker. So
Which has been
China's
going
in
on
the
since
middle.
2014, actually.
Right. Wait. Before we go back to your point, I
yeah.
just want to finish one thing. And the nexus is when I say that to Tom in a voice note, and he picks up the phone when he has time, and he calls me, and he goes, yeah. And who's the odd man out? I go, Europe. He goes, right. Now I'm not looking at the negative space. I'm focusing on the positive space. But
Right.
Tom is starting at the intent side. And he's like, look at that. Look at that. And so the thing is, like, if you want to look at it from a power sharing, it used to be America and Europe versus Russia and China. So the West versus the East. But I think, and I say I think only because I thought about it in the context of LIBOR to SOFR, or the context of the LBMA getting completely depleted of metal, and on the fact that the stable coins will further undermine the euro dollar, that the US has orphaned Europe. Like the money we're giving the Ukraine is like a severance pay to Europe. That's why they have conscription coming up. That's why they're all increasing their budgets. That's like when Trump said, like, look, I thought Trump was just being a lunatic when he said we're out of NATO. No, it's happening. He's just a messenger. That idea has been coming for years because it's not sustainable. So now I back up, and now Tom's laying his stuff on me, and his stuff is basically this. Yeah, and who gets in the way of all this shit, of this prevention? Look, what on a good day, China and the US are fighting a world that's in the throes of deglobalization and preventing a nation from getting left out, because that's what starts a war, which, by the way, is what happened that started World War I. We had a very globalized economy. Tech was it. You had steamships shipping beef from Argentina to Europe. That was a big deal. And then the globalization back then collapsed. The Austro-Hungarian empires collapsed. The successors to the Roman Empire collapsed. Nation states were born. You had a complex, you had a collapse of complexity. And because they didn't prepare for that properly, you had one nation that was landlocked that got screwed, and that was Serbia, and that was a hotbed for anarchism, nationalist anarchism, and boom, you had World War One start. And I think we're trying to avoid, on some level, a World War III because it's bad
Oh
for
yeah.
business.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to hand this all back to Tom after I say this. And then you have to look at it as those four powers, or in this case, it's the U.S., Europe, Russia, and China, or let's say the G7 versus the. Well, Europe is the odd man out. Their currency isn't tied fiscally to their bond market. They're still not united. They still don't have their shit together. And the epicenter of Europe is the financialization. Now that Germany's economy has gone to shit from letting all the industry export, so the financialization, that hub is in the UK. And when you take that away, Europe is really, really behind the curve. And so I say, well, Europe is slowly but surely realizing that they are existentially threatened. And so they'll do, I say Europe, so it means Europe and UK. Tom's going to focus on the UK on it. I say Europe and UK, and they're fighting for their survival, and they're scared to death of stable coins. They're scared to death of LBMAB. Like,
They're
Europe
they're
is the
they're they're
old
st- they're
mall.
they're scared to death of all these things. But Vince, you're leaving out the most important part of the conversation that we had the other
Of
day.
course I have.
I know,
What?
which goes all the way back to the day that he and I met on Tom Bodroviks' Palisades Gold Radio space,
Oh yeah, that's
and I
right.
mentioned to him. And then so Vince came on, and I'm like, and I'm like having a little bit of imposter syndrome at this point, like because Vince comes out like a house on fire. I'll be honest with you. When I listened to you talk the first time, I was really intimidated. I'm like, oh my god, how am I gonna, how do I follow this act? Because dude, Vince is
Right.
good, right? And I'm like, I don't know this guy from
That's
Adam.
funny.
I don't know what his perspective on the world is or anything else. I have no idea if he's gonna fight me, bro, or if he's gonna be
Right.
like, oh my god, that's cool. And then I come up and I say, look, at the end of the day, in order for us to get through any of this,
Right.
we're gonna have to, embrace Judy Shelton's idea of a gold-backed treasury bond,
Right.
and Vince being Vince. And I found out immediately that Vince was awesome because he didn't turn around and try and shut me down as being the challenger. He said,
No.
"Holy Christ, that's a great idea." And then like,
Yeah.
yeah, you throw it out on the yield curve, and then we had a great conversation, and were off
Right.
to the races, and a
Right.
friendship was born. But what's
That's right.
important to understand is that this is the end of the triangle trade. This is what Vince texted me or sent to me the other day. And he said, am I crazy? I'm like, no, it's the perfect triangle trade because a gold-backed treasury bond is what collateralizes the entire system.
Right. Right.
Okay. Because what you said to me was that look, and now we're watching them really start talking up this idea of potentially throwing gold out on the yield curve in some way, manner, shape, or form. And this whole schmoozing of Judy Shelton that she's not out there doing a book tour anymore. What she's doing is laying the groundwork and the foundation for a fundamental change in the way the U.S. Treasury market is going to trade. It's
Right.
now going to go back to being collateralized by hard assets. Stable coins are part of that because Bitcoin is also a hard asset. And there's going to be no leverage. If you read the Clarity Act very carefully, there's no leverage in the stablecoin market. The stable coins that are issued themselves by local banks could be levered up on a fractional reserve basis if they want to, but they still have to hold collateral against their
Right.
stable coin reserves at a minimum 100% collateralized, you know,
It's the
fact.
death of financialization. It's the death of financial leverage because you have
Yes.
to actually have what you say you have. You can't have a
Mm-hmm.
promise of what you have down the road, which is the
And
death
who's
of
and who is the epicenter of financialization and infinite rehypothecation of assets?
uh,
I wonder. Do I need to like spell it out? And it's a
it's an
six-letter
island.
word that starts with L and ends in N, and it doesn't, and most of them actually aren't Jews.
Lebanon. Lebanon isn't in the UK,
Right, it's the Bank of Lebanon with its $14 worth of U.S. Treasury reserves.
right?
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah. If we can get into it today, we will. But the Judy Shelton bond thing, I just want to say very quickly, I went from because I did a mini podcast for my guys today
right.
from the feedback I got from you, and we may not get into it because we have to go through the whole other stuff, but understand that I'm very pro the Judy Shelton idea,
Mhm.
and and I was and I'm still wholeheartedly into it. But there was a time period there where I backed off because I had a conversation with someone who has a unique perspective,
Mm.
and he's very similar to me in mindset, but he always takes the opposite when when I have a conversation with him. And he said, Vince, that idea will never float. And I'm like, why? Because it's a great idea. He goes, no, dude, they all take our bonds. They all take our bonds without gold. We're not going to give them our fucking gold. We made promise to give it to them 50 years from now, but we're not going to give it to them. It would undermine our. And so I went back and I thought about it. I go, yeah, you're right. We're just too in love with fiat to actually admit that gold's important. So Judy's idea won't happen. All right. So then a couple months later, I go back and I go, but what if there's a threat of someone else doing it first? He goes, well,
Mm.
then we're fucked because we're too slow to react. And so
And
that's
guess
what
what?
China's doing now. So Judy's idea is out there. Book aside, right? Idea aside, I feel that people like Judy Shelton, and I say this respectfully, like Judy Shelton, and people who have influence and who have good ideas are mandated by the government to spread those ideas, not directly mandated, but mandated by the government to spread those ideas to make the public more aware of them because eventually the US will do what it needs to do to keep its place in the world, but in
Mm.
order to do that it must do that domestically first, because if the people don't understand it and don't accept it, we can't facilitate it overseas. So, for example, stable coins are the cure for. I mean, let's pretend that stable coins are perfect for this moment. Example of the Judy Shelton bond thing.
Mm.
Stable coins are the cure for our problems. Let's say,
Right.
and one of the byproducts of that is foreign currencies will be destroyed, and that's what I wrote about this morning. Right, foreign currencies will be destroyed. But why are we lobbying for it so hard domestically? Because the American people have to want it, because the American people do make the laws in that sense. And once we want it, America can look at the rest of the world, specifically Europe, specifically London, and say, sorry, that's what the people want. Go fuck yourself. We're doing it,
Right.
So it gives us cover. Now, the reason I say that is because I'm back to the concept of, although I don't think we want, remember, these are neo-Keynesian Americans, I don't think we want to have a gold bond. We have to have it as a plan B. It has
Mm.
to be there, whether it's a gold bond for the rest of the world to compete with, which may or may not work, or whether it's something for our people to have first. We have to have this out there, and the US will do everything it can to preserve its global reserve status by hook or by crook. And it actually starts with things that help us internationally that the American public will accept.
Bingo.
And that's it.
There's two things that came up while you were talking that I was thinking that immediately popped into my head that you and I haven't talked about. There's one, we talk about Tether. Tether now has holds
Yeah,
more
yeah,
gold. Tether now holds more gold on his balance sheet than does Bitcoin or
yeah.
US Treasuries, one or the other. And the second one is the following, which is that your note about competition is interesting. Not because you're right, because China is going to do it. What if it's not China? What is the one player at the table who
Oh,
has access to nearly 20,000 tons of gold?
right. You mean it? You mean the Bank of England? You mean
I
England?
mean the ECB.
Oh, fuck them. I mean, I'm sorry. This
No,
in
no, no.
this sense,
What I'm getting at is
no,
if
you're being
the,
reasonable. I'm being you here. And I'm saying, fuck them. They don't have the technology to do it. They don't have the brains to do it. They've let their vaults be empty. The LBMA needs to crash and burn tomorrow. And they don't have the unity to do it. They can't even fucking speak the same language over there. All right, so
no,
that's my
no,
top of the line.
I'm not arguing with you. But if you want a counter argument to this as to why they're clearly pushing for political
Oh yeah,
and fiscal control through the European Commission, through the ECB and the BIS and the IMF. That's
right,
their goal.
right.
If we threaten a gold-backed bond with a triangle trade between the Rush and why are the Russians part of this? One of the questions that we have not answered in all of this, but it should be obvious to everybody. The United States and China are the two industrial centers of poles of industrial power in the world. They have to drain London of the pricing leverage of all of the strategic commodities that run
Right.
their industrial economies. And who's the guy getting fucked on price for all of the commodities that they're bringing into the world? The Russians. If the Russians want to be, as a nuclear power and as a military power and as the gateway and as the effectively as the defender against Europe, the European cancer spreading again,
right.
the Russians have to be dealt into the table, dealt in here, and they're also the major commodity producer. And when you reorient the globe away from the Eurocentric focus of the globe and to either tilt it towards the North Pole or tilt it or shift it to the Pacific Ocean, you realize that Russia, United States, and China are the three superpowers that need to coordinate. And Russia, being the massive commodity producer, needs to have someone who is not their mortal enemy help them get full pricing for their commodities. They're still going to be effectively colonized by the United States and Russia, right in the United States and China, but on much better terms. I want you to think through now. We had a big deal this week. This is another thing just literally popped into my head. The Russians cut a deal with Niger over the future supply of 1,000 tons of yellow cake or 100,000 tons of yellow cake or 1,000,000 tons of yellow cake, whatever the hell it is. And they paid nearly market price for them, as opposed to the way the French have been strip mining that country for years and getting and taking. Not only did they give them a shit price, like 5 cents on the freaking dollar, they also took 50% of the take on top of the 5 cents on the dollar. Like, it was a terrible, terrible deal. The Russians just came in and offered them 80% of market price, and that's like a massive increase. And of course, the French are screaming that this is a security issue and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Like, okay, perfect example of what I'm talking about here. The United States-China axis on this new global pricing for commodities is to protect Russia's ability to generate wealth properly. And yes, are they going to get the best terms? No, they're going to get much, much, much better terms than they've been getting, than they got from Europe, where Putin sold gas and oil at a fucking loss in order to placate them, to keep them from attacking them. And then they just use that cheap energy to then build up a fucking army in the United States and Ukraine and the United States in order to go fuck them anyway. Like, this is the story of the, in broad strokes, of the last 30 years since the end of, I don't care if someone disagrees with me or not. That's my version of the.
I'm going to push back for
history.
Clarity.
When you look at it from the Russians' perspective, and everything they say, correlates to that. So understand that everything you've laid out here, it makes sense that the United States has to be the one that offers the gold and has to beat the ECB to the punch, because clearly what they want is in Europe is to start World War III, collapse all the national governments, give the European Commission tax and spend authority, create the digital euro by 2029, and all they have to do is they can back it with the 18 or 19,000 tons.
Hold on. You're going too fast. Hold on. I need to go back a little bit because I'm not sure if I'm pushing back.
No,
or if I disagree, if I disagree with your tone. Meaning, when you said the U.S. in conjunction, like axis is the word used, the U.S., you made it sound like the U.S. is pro-Russia getting the best price. I don't see that. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
as of right now, until Ukraine, Russia is settled and the war is settled.
Right.
Oh no, I absolutely see that, because look, Russia's never going to get they're not going to get a better price from Europe.
Right.
Okay. So whatever price they're going to get is going to be better.
So trilateral trade between between the US, Russia, and China would normalize when this is over, and Europe is the odd man out. So I just want to make sure you're not professing love for the Russian, for like, I'm metaphorically speaking, like you're saying, this is my interpretation of what I'm hearing. China and the US are working together, or at least acknowledging each other's existence while they try and muddle through this problem. China right now is in love with Russia. Russia right now does not like the US. The US seeks to renormalize relationships with Russia. And part of that would be getting over this war. And then these three powers can have a Genoa 2 conference and maybe we get something normal again.
And
But
remember also that the Russians don't love the Chinese. The
no,
Russians
they
understand.
front
The
look.
Russians understand that they are a marriage of convenience.
Yes. Please. That's for to those not old enough to know this, the whole reason the petrodollar exists, and not the petrodollar, the whole reason that we had a deal with Mao Zedong in 1976 when Nixon visited was because China and Russia were on the verge of fucking war. And we needed someone to buy our treasuries because we couldn't make shit anymore. And so we cut a deal with China that says, hey, you hate Russia? We hate Russia. Buy our bonds. We'll buy your stuff. And the whole post 1976 to 2025, 2020 economy of China selling us goods and then spending the money on our treasuries was born out of the Russian Chinese split, the communist split. So
So
yeah, I
Sino-Soviet
mean,
split. Yeah.
it's you're right. It's a marriage of convenience. Russia is, depends on who you're talking to, but Russia could be Asian, it could be European. And so it could be white, could be yellow, depending on how you look at
Well,
it.
I mean, again, you have to think about Russia's geographical proximity to
Five time
opening up
zones?
to opening up the entire, like, it's like, I think 11 time zones or something like that. It's to opening up Central Asia and this is the thing. Central Asia has been kept warring amongst itself by the British
Right.
for 300 years. And
That's
we
right.
have to, and so Russia gets cut into this deal. They're going to get a great price for their commodities, as is Afghanistan, as is everybody else, because the infrastructure will be opened up for all of these countries, for all the former Soviet stands, for everybody else, for Mongolia, all of it. There's all this wealth that could be generated that could be, dug up and built into something, into beautiful things, if not for the incessant warring and the incessant, tall poppy. We can all talk about the CCP being like, everybody in China having a tall poppy syndrome. You stick your head up, they cut it off. No. The fucking British perfected that model. That's their geopolitical model. As we fall down, we have to take everybody down with us until we can always maintain a superior status through financialization.
Right.
To your point, this is the reversal of the financialization process. The Russians get to be like, at the end of the day, the Russians really are the hard collateral, or the source of the hard collateral that the United States is going to collateralize through the gold-backed bonds, which is why Russia gets to be dealt into the freaking triangle.
Right. So it is kind of like a three-way prisoner's dilemma in the sense that, to your point, that China is a marriage of convenience with Russia. So China's looking at Russia going, you know what? We want to be partners with them for now because they're a nuclear power. We don't want to have a fucking nuclear power on our border with a problem. So let's be partners with them until we get what we want out of the U.S. And the U.S. is looking at China and going, I guess we should work with China until we can, figure out a way to substitute for oil and really, like, everybody's out for themselves, but everybody is recognizing the other person's weakness. You said I want to talk about for a second. It's not a digression, but it's related. Uh, you when you started, not started, but you've been doing this for a while, but when you started, when it started sinking in, it actually started with the SOFR LIBOR thing. When you said, when I saw LIBOR go to SOFR, I said, oh, big deal. We're fixing the manipulation of LIBOR. That's what I said, and I moved on. Right. So, and then as we got to know each other a little bit better, and you paid me some compliments, and I'm going to say the same exact things back to you. Your perspective has changed mine, and so I'm going to give everyone who's not familiar with it why I agree with Tom on the UK stuff. When Tom was saying to me, SOFR LIBOR, I was like, yeah, no big deal. It's just but as time went on, I started to understand what he was saying, and the reason that I paid attention was not because of his sparkling wit and conversation, which it could be a reason of itself. But I had a friend, a British friend, years ago, before I was ready to understand this. This is all, I wasn't ready to understand it, but he knew it as a Brit. And we were talking about the Iraqi War too. It was like right after Iraqi War too. And I
Mhm.
said, God, I was completely American. Saddam Hussein, yada, yada, yada. We should have got him the first time. We shouldn't have let him go into Kuwait. And I was pretty advanced in my thinking in the concept that, the Kurds, we backed the Kurds, then George Bush won, fuck them. And then anyway, so I'm going into all that American geopolitics. And he looked at me just like laughing. And he said, Vince, you know whose fault this all is? This is 20 years ago before I was ready to hear it. I go, whose fault is it? The British guy. He goes, it's the British. And I go, why? I go, why? I don't know anything about this.
Right.
And so he pulls out a map and he goes, you see that? We're talking about Iraq now, Iraq,
Mhm.
Kuwait. He goes, you see that? I go, yeah. He goes, well, I'm completely ignorant in this field now. I'm a math, derivatives, focused data
Right.
guy, right? So he's opening me up to the British view of geopolitics.
Yep.
This is why that I love Tom so much. So this guy goes like this. He goes, see this map here? I go, yeah. He goes, before World War One, you know what that was? That area? And he points to Kuwait. He goes, that was Iraq. I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, you notice how Iraq has no access to the ocean? I go, yeah, well, that's because the fucking British went in and carved out Kuwait. I mean, I don't have it exactly right, but this is
Right.
his words. He goes, the British would come into a nation, and after they
Mhm.
conquered it, they would divide it along ethnic lines so they could keep power. And so Kuwait, access to the
Mhm.
water, Iraq not. He's like, I'm not a fan of Saddam Hussein, but all he was doing was trying to reunite Iraq to what it used to be. And then
Yep.
he goes, see, India and Pakistan, we did that. We
Mhm.
drew a line down the middle and said, fuck you. And then he would go into it. Like, this is crazy shit. Like had to start reading old Rudyard Kipling once I learned his.
Yeah.
Um, he would say to me, he'd say,
Tennyson. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Tennyson. But Tennyson was a patriot. Kipling fucking was,
Mm.
no, I'm sorry. George Orwell and Rudyard Kipling. Early George Orwell, about his days in India, Burmese days. It's fucking
Yeah,
fascinating.
and then he got picked up by MI6, and
Yeah, all
sorry,
right. Well,
my apologies.
we'll argue about that.
Whatever.
But
I kid.
let me
I
finish this
kid, of
point.
course, but
Let me take this another step further, which is why
yeah.
I listen so closely, and I don't go, he's crazy when he says it. And so the guy's still talking to me, and I go, well, how do they do that? How do they win? How do they win is what I asked. He
Mhm.
said, well, what the UK would do is it would go into a country with a large majority of people that was in control. So it was a populist, generally speaking. You go in and you find out who's in power. And generally speaking, it was the majority of people. So, for example, let's say it's a Muslim country that's 80% Shia and 20% Sunni. Because what they would do is they would go in, they would arm the 20%
Yep.
and put the 20% in power, overtaking the 80%. And now
Mhm.
you have a predominantly Shia country run by Sunnis backed by the UK.
Yep.
Because we would give them the guns
Yep.
to fight the majority, and that was the whole Shia Sunni split. They did it in India and Pakistan, Hindus, and they would just go in, who's the majority? Okay, the majority's in control. Okay, who's the minority? Here's a gun. Go fucking kill them, and we'll back you.
The whole point is to take a minority and amplify the grievance. It's grievance politics, right?
Which, by the way, is
They
woke.
did the same thing to the South here in the United States
Right,
over the tariffs, over everything else. They set the situation up for the South to hate the North. Then
right,
and then the North responds with tariffs because the British were making it impossible for the South to sell directly to the North. They had to sell their primary goods, their commodities to British textile mills who could undercut anything that was happening and undercut Philadelphia or New York or
yeah,
whatever. And then so what did the northern states have to do? They're like, well, we're putting a tariff on these goods, and that of course then starts turning into a states' rights issue, and then they start doing this, and then the British, you know, amplified the abolitionist movement here in the United States in
right,
order to get the North to hate the South. So you arm both sides of the conflict. And
right,
then, as my friend Alex Craner likes to point out, red ants, black ants, put them in a jar, shake them up, and watch them fight, which is
right,
exactly what the Civil War was
right,
from different perspectives. And so they're doing the same thing now in the United States as and by the way, I've been saying this, there's India, not India. When they leave India, they leave Pakistan behind. When they form when they left the Middle East officially, they drew up with the French Sykes-Picot, which no one voted on, but all of a
Right.
sudden these were all the new borders for all these countries, which split the
Right.
Kurds up into four different nations and all the rest of it. By the way, and I've been saying this now for a while, and they did the same thing with the United States and Canada. Canada was set up as an antipode to the United States after the Revolutionary War.
Okay.
The loyalists from the Northeast, the British loyalists in the Northeast, fucked off and took over to the Toronto area, which at that point was nothing but a bunch of fur trappers. And
Right.
that's where this, as from what I understand from Canadians, that's where the term the Laurentian elites come from. That's who runs the friggin' government up there. That's who
So the loyalists to the crown after the Revolutionary War migrated a little bit north, basically.
they migrated to Canada, and then the British kept backing them and building them
Oh,
up
same
over
idea.
time. And so same thing. And then 30 years later, we get the War of 1812, where the Canadians still, delude themselves into thinking that they're a world power because they, helped the British sack Washington,
Right.
DC. And we could take them over tomorrow with 4 tanks and a plane,
Right. But
you
that's
know,
interesting. So
and some rejects from the special forces because what are we going to get? The RCMP? Have
right.
fun,
No,
guys. Like,
no, but
I mean, like,
I'm looking at the
we'll buy
roadmap. I
them
mean,
off with a 6 pack of Moosehead and
yeah, but you're doing
and a
that.
12 pack
Hold
of
on, hold on.
Labatt's.
Let me just so basically, to add to my UK friend, so to codify what he taught me is you're basically saying, find out who the majority is, find out who the minority is, amplify the grievance of the minority, arm the minority, and
Mhm.
then take control.
And
That's
then
basically
start the color revolution process, and then amplify the grievance of the other guy, and then demonize
right,
the minority that you've already armed
right.
with some other
It's
argument.
almost like conquer and divide,
Oh yeah, it's
right?
divide. Yeah, 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 yeah. Absolutely the
Conquer
British
and
divide.
then keep them divided.
Yes, conquer and then
It's
keep them
interesting.
moving.
Yeah. And so
That,
so
and it
so
happens
now
everywhere.
let me go back to my I'm sorry.
No, I'm just gonna say that's the model. That's where we are,
All right.
and it's everywhere. And
So
one of the things about World War One that has to be talked about is that the goal of World War One was to destroy both the Russian and the Ottoman Empire,
yep.
and it largely succeeded. And that happened because the British had a huge hand in the rise of Woodrow Wilson. No, Herbert Hoover. I always get that wrong. Yeah, no, Woodrow Wilson. Yeah, it's 32 and 12. Yeah, it's Wilson and Wilsonian.
Wilson wanted to spread capitalism.
Wilson
Right.
wanted to spread globalism.
Right.
He
He was
wanted
the
to spread.
first neocon too.
He was a UK
Yeah.
sixth through and through.
Definitely the first
I
neocon. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, if you want to put it in those terms. And then that's what, and that is what colors all of this stuff. It's why we got
Right.
the reserve. It's why we got the 17th Amendment. It's why we got the income tax. Why we wound up with, at the end of Woodrow Wilson's term, we wound up with involved in World War One with British
Yep.
foreign policy and a British central bank and a British taxing system.
Right. That's true. That's true. The League of Nations failed. It had no teeth.
Yep.
And I mean, this is another conversation, but the
Mm-hmm.
only study I've done of Woodrow Wilson is that he was like an evangelical. He was described as an evangelical spreader of democracy, and
Mm-hmm.
that meant war. Like
Yeah.
he wanted to. No, but that's why I say the neocon thing. He ended up being a tool of the UK in that respect. Yeah,
I don't think he was a tool. I think he was a willing accomplice. I think he was the
right,
first. I think he was the first truly traitorous president.
right.
Now that I go back over it, that's what
Yeah.
I think. And
So so
Teddy Roosevelt was his willing accomplice.
so now you're over my head. Now I'm not going to.
Yeah.
We'll
Well,
talk
how do
about
you
this
think
off
of
the
the
air.
Bull Moose Party? Like Roosevelt split the Democrats, split the Republicans in order to allow Wilson to come to
I
power.
don't know my history there. I'm just going to say yes. You're right. I don't know my history there. I don't know my history there.
That's fine.
It's a
You're right.
big,
Yeah, I'm throwing it out there. You can tell me I'm wrong, and that's fine. Everybody needs to revisit all of these people and their roles in history
yeah,
from a different perspective, because
right,
there's, again, history is not written by the winners per se. It's written by those who have who have access to the printing press,
right.
and who has access to the media. And British media has dominated, and the British media and the British the European um um, media and its industrial base, of the 19th century and into the early 20th century was so powerful that it, clouds everything, and it's hard for us to think otherwise. So that's where I am.
Oh, I want to give you a current event about the British media or the European media.
Sure.
Um, uh, Earlier in the year, there seemed to be a complete like deluge of research from my end and from news that we could all see coming out of, well, I'm not going to say what's coming out of yet, but it was basically this. The dollar is dead. De-dollarization is
Mm-hmm.
happening. They're selling. This is what was happening was the dollar was down, but treasuries were down and stocks were down. It was like we had that problem during the year, right? Right, leading into April. And the narrative that bloomed around it was legitimate. And the narrative was if the dollar is down and bonds are down and stocks are down, then there's a capital flight out of the US. And that's mathematically true. How big it
Yes.
is, no one knows. But what I started noticing, I had seen a couple good reports talking about why it was happening. What was the plumbing report? I'm like, okay, that's good. I understand that. And then I saw another one that said why it should happen, how America sucks, without saying how America sucks. And then I started reading the headlines, and all the headlines that were death of the dollar were uh, Deutsche Bank, uh, uh, SocGen. The French banks were really bad.
Yeah.
Uh,
BNP
uh,
Paribas.
right, and then it was Reuters,
Yep.
which is right,
Financial
and
Times.
and I would
The
not have looked at it. I would not have sliced the world that way, sliced the apple that way, had we not had our conversations. Because I was like there's an analyst at Deutsche Bank. He's essentially an FX guru, and Zero Hedge will write about him when he's got great stuff. And so I'm reading that and I'm going, wait a minute, that's right, that's right, that's right. I'm like, okay, this guy's objective, he's not biased, I'm with him, right? And then I read something else, I go, yeah, but kind of shittier. And then one day, about a month later, I started seeing Michael Hartnett, who works for Bank of America,
Mhm.
CIO, who's an American, who's a patriot. Out of nowhere, he doesn't write this way. He'll just be like, "This is this, and this is this," and then out of nowhere, he'll say, "And by the way, I've been looking, and I've seen absolutely no sign of foreigners pulling money out of U.S. Treasuries." And I'm like, why would he say that? And I realized that's when I went back to and we talked about it that the European Union was unioned against the dollar and they were negotiating with us. And the reason I bring that up so you can continue with this
Mhm.
is it's happening. It just started happening again.
Yes.
It started happening again. And it's funny how it happens at the same time that China does something as well. So kind of
It's
like,
also it's also really interesting that it happens the minute that Trump wins a major battle against his domestic enemies.
oh, really? I didn't see
Oh
that.
yeah.
Give me one. Give me an example.
I he just took care of the shutdown
Yeah,
without
that's true.
giving the Democrats anything. Back in March and April, it was all leading up to the tariff tantrum.
Right.
What I noted, and I've been noticing in the TIC report as it comes out every month, is that the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, common denominator Mark Carney.
Yeah, one shorts and the other covers, and they just keep. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So one's selling and then handing the money
Yep.
over to the Bank of England. The Bank of England sells it back to the
Yeah.
Bank of Canada, and they do this play, and they're playing in the tens and the 30 space. Probably
Right.
playing also in the 20s, but the 20s are so illiquid that
Right.
I you know what I mean. It would be the perfect place actually for them to bomb markets because you can play in the 20 space because it's so illiquid.
Yeah.
But let's just talk in the 10-30 space because that's where it matters. So you watch the 10-30 spread, which is why I break the whole yield curve down 1 month, 2 month spread, 2 month, 3 month spread. I break it
Right.
down by spread all the way out to the 10-30 spread. and you can see that so that you can like watch the bear steepener trade happening, or the
Right.
bull flattener, or whatever you want to
Right.
call it.
The
But the
point of
reality
origin
is,
where it all starts. Right. Exactly.
but now, as opposed to having a Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen out there selling twos and ones and twos in order to bias the long end of the, and then allow Lagarde to play with the long end of the curve.
Right.
Now we're just having the Bank of England do it itself, because Besson's not doing that. Besson's not going to
Right.
be manipulating the inversion of our yield curve between 6 months and 3 years. He's not going to amplify he has no reason to amplify the yield curve inversion in the belly of the yield curve. He would be
Right.
wanting to see that flatten in order to give cover for his
Right.
compatriot Jerome
Right. To
Powell.
confirm
So
the
therefore,
smoothness and make the front connect to the
so
back.
now
Yeah.
watching the 6 month, 1 year inversion dip while the 10-30 spread is blowing out, they're selling 30s and they're buying ones.
Right. Right. Right.
It's not that tough, folks. It really isn't. And there's no capital flight. So they've
Right.
also heavily concentrated through rehypothecation and leverage into the Mag 7, leaving the S&P 493 behind. So whenever they want to engineer a panic like they did on Friday, we're doing
Right.
this on Saturday morning, all you have to do is sell some of the Mag 7, sell some 30s, sell a little Bitcoin, bomb, and then use the proceeds from that to bomb gold.
Right.
Which is exactly what they fucking did. Or it was actually the Americans selling gold in order to hand the market off to China next week at $90 off an ounce. So the Chinese can then turn around and bid it right back up again and fuck London even harder.
Right.
It could be either of those things. It could,
right.
Or it could be a combination of all of these things.
No, it's a game. It's a game of tennis. You said a couple of things that I want to, if I could just, because I know my people will be listening to this as well, and I want to,
right.
I want to paint a little bit of a picture. You're talking about the yield curve, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we talk about that a lot, but I don't use that terminology, and I just want to. I think some people might benefit from this. There's two concepts you talked about: the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. I'm going to confirm how that happens, right? So with a floor trader analogy, and then I want to for a second just talk about the yield curve. The more interesting part is the first part. If I'm not rephrasing what you're saying properly, let me know. But it seems to me that you're saying that the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England are coordinated in bombing the market when they want to get something done. And so ultimately, right. Okay. So now let me, so I read you right. So now let me explain what that is to people who don't get that. When I was on the floor, there was a broker, and the broker was known to handle Goldman Sachs's business. And it doesn't have to be Goldman Sachs. He was known to handle Bank of, Astro America's business. And Bank of Astro America would bid on the floor in size. I'm a buyer of silver, 1,000 contracts. And then someone across the ring, I would see these things happen, would come out of the booth and sell him 1,000. And the market would just drop because that 1,000 lot contract on the floor was being viewed right there as support. And so when someone takes 1,000 lots out in one trade, that's a sign that there's more to come. So the bid is getting, so think about this with the bond market. The bid is getting whacked. That's a signal. So here's the bid, here's the ask, and we call that crossing the bid ask. I buy here, you sell there. Retail buys the ask. Retail hits the bid. Institutions don't do that. Right. Institutions park their spot, right? So now what we found out later is that on multiple times, Bank of Astro America was bidding through a broker that had a sign that said Bank of Astro America on it. And Bank of Astro America's other division on the other side was hitting the bid, what's called we call it self-dealing. Right. You're trading with yourself to give the impression that it's bearish. So a conflict of interest is what it really is. But there would be a Chinese wall or an artificial division there that would allow them to do. I go, oh, that's the bank, and that's the bank's customer who clears at the bank, who's invested in by the bank. Oh, they're painting the tape lower. And by the way, it would go lower. So they would paint the market lower that way. So I'll give you an example. In real estate, if you want a house's value to go up, now mind you, there's a lot of houses, so you can't do it with just one house. What's the price of the house? 500,000. So you buy it at 500,000, then you sell back to yourself at 520, then you sell back to yourself at 540. And the point is you self-deal all the way up or all the way down. For all I know, China could be doing that with gold. But I do believe that when banks want to make the US look like it's not doing so well, and in other words, I'm saying I know this phenomenon exists. It
Mm-hmm.
has existed forever, and it's called self-dealing. And what you're essentially saying is that England will self-deal or deal with someone they have influence over back
Mm-hmm.
and forth, so that ultimately the losses are a wash trade. You lost the
Mm-hmm.
money, we made the money. We'll
Right.
give you a tax break or something. That's what you're saying, right?
And yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And then note that while they were like trying to ramp up into the end of October,
Right,
this idea that there was going to be a credit market stress in the United States,
right,
they were setting the table for that, because
right,
you can't do this into a vacuum. You got to set the market on edge. You got to get the algorithms to read all these headlines and be primed to sell and
right,
piggyback on the sale. So what happened? And then so Andrew Bailey came out and said something, and then Financial Times said something, and there were a whole spate of things in the British slop fucking
right,
shitbag press and the BBC and blah, 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 all the way down the line. And then the Fed came out and counter programmed. And the Fed came out with that white paper that said, oh, the Caymans don't control $420 billion worth of treasuries. There's 1.4 trillion running around in the basis trade over there. That's the Fed going, I see you, fuck off. If you try to take out our markets, we're going to fuck you in the ass.
right, right.
Okay, that's no different than what they tried, because this time, because again, I go back to what happened in
Hold on,
March.
stop 1 second. The basis trade is the mechanics of the self-dealing that you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, I want everyone to hear that.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah, yeah.
good.
That's important, because what they or they use the basis trade
Yeah,
in the financial press to make everybody feel smart, because now all of a sudden we stayed at a
right,
Holiday Inn Express last night and we learned a new term, and we all get to learn how important the basis trade is.
that's so
This is what they
true.
did in fucking during the tariff tantrum. They seeded Zero Hedge and all these places, and everybody's reading all this stuff about the basis trade is blowing up. I saw half. I got sent from my people half a dozen, if not a dozen, different fucking YouTube videos from channels I'd never heard of, that all of a sudden, out of in the last 6 months, got 100,000 new subscribers, all explaining in great terms why SOFR versus IORB are blowing out, why this is happening, why
Right,
that's happening.
right.
All this shit's going on, and I'm like, and during the tariff tantrum, I almost fell for this. I started going down that rabbit hole, and then I had a guy
Like me when I do
like
bottom up.
you,
Right. I'm
who
like,
was
wait, is
selling,
that real?
who pinged me, and I think it was either a Twitter DM or he was a patron with a
Right,
Patreon DM, a long freaking, and he said, Tom, they're not attacking the basis trade is not doing this. They're attacking the SOFR strip, the 3 month, the 6 month, the 6 month,
right,
the three
right,
year out SOFR futures contract. That's what they're attacking.
right.
But they're making you look for the basis trade, but that's not what the basis trade is blowing out, because they're attacking the SOFR strip.
Right.
I know,
SOFR's more
I
important.
trade the SOFR strip.
Right, right,
And then I went and I looked, and of course, because I chart the SOFR futures contract all the time, every day when I do my market reports for my people, I look at the SOFR futures curve, and I update all the internal yield spreads within the U.S. Yield curve, because I'm constantly in that. I know. I mean, I have it bookmarked. I have a permanent
right,
opening at
right,
a permanent tab open for the 3 months SOFR futures contract quote on the COMEX. So what did I do? I went in and I started looking at the charts. And during that 5-day period, the fucking SOFR market, the futures market, were moving 10, 15, 25 basis points an hour.
Yeah, I know, I know, I know.
So there were the
Right,
forensics.
right.
There it all was. And then the minute that, and then Trump, then, what Trump does? He lets them shoot their fucking wad. And then 4 days later, he goes, yeah, I'll back off on the tariffs. And then they had to create, and then after they got caught and they got fucked, then they had to create the next Monday, then they created the taco trade. Did you
Right.
notice that one? The
No, I
taco
didn't.
came into our language all of a sudden. The taco trade. Trump will, like, reverse himself on
Trump
Tuesday.
always chickens out. Yeah, yeah.
Trump
By the way,
always
that
chickens
one's
out.
that acronym is stuck. It's still out there.
I
Yeah.
know it's still out there, and it's
Still out there.
bullshit.
Oh,
It's
it's not.
bullshit.
Okay, you and I don't fucking think Trump is that fucking sharp.
I think that Trump plus Bessent plus Powell plus all of these people together are
right.
like, yeah, yeah, we
Trump's
can
the
back.
attack dog. Bessent's that smart, in my opinion, right?
Yeah. No,
So
I think I think Trump is instinctually smart. Trump
right,
is a very intuitive guy. He
right.
reads intention really well. Bessent's the one that's plotting all this shit. So
Oh
is
yeah,
Powell.
yeah,
Like Powell's thinking 3 moves ahead on these people.
yeah. I think Powell's actually. I think Powell's doing a good job of letting the market wring itself out. Like everybody, like to speak about it from a macro point of view, the
Yeah.
last, like right now, we're in a situation where, uh, if you're talking to a macro person, this is going to be about how I think Powell's actually potentially doing it right here. I mean, so when Powell announced that he was going to stop QT, which I don't agree with, but he's going to stop QT December 1st. The market initially took it as bullish because it was dovish, and then the market started to sell off. And it seems like that if you want to give the market a personality, the market participants are testing the Fed's ability to keep their deadline at December 1st. Like
Mhm.
maybe we can get them to stop QT in the middle of November. And in doing so, that would show that the Fed's credibility is weaker. It would also show that the Fed is a little bit nervous. And this is also that's behaviorally what I'm seeing, and it's tying in with the bad press that's coming out now. True.
Yeah,
And
no,
and
that makes
so and
okay, go ahead.
I one more sense. And I think people that are talking Powell's going to cave. Powell's going to cave. As a person who will say that once in a while,
Mhm.
uh, I don't think Powell caves anymore. And I don't think Powell caves to anyone anymore because he's letting the market wring itself out. So mind you, he'll still cave if he has to, but it won't be as obvious. Like BTFP was a cave, yield curve control, which will come in directly as a cave, but he's not going to just do what they want. He's going to do something else. I don't know what it is, but if we come in, like, what did he do today? What did they do on Friday? The stock market tested him, and the plunge protection team, the exchange stabilization fund, came in and bought it. That's what I think, among other people. But they
Yeah.
said, we're not going to give you the policy decision you want. We're just going to stabilize the market until December 1st. Go fuck yourself. And then we'll do stop QT then. And you won't go be burned.
And there's another angle on the whole, and this is an interesting angle that I'm just starting to explore. And I don't have a mechanism in my head for this, but
Right?
with the shutdown ending,
Yeah.
now I want to bring in the mortgage-backed securities that are on the Fed's balance sheet.
Okay.
And this is going to feel like a digression, but it's not, because the shutdown is all about the taking Fannie and Freddie out of conservatorship, reestablishing the traditional 30-year mortgage, and now potentially the 50-year mortgage that Trump is now talking about. Now, let me cook here for just a second.
Sure.
The Fed's got a ton of mortgage-backed securities still on their balance sheet. You take Fannie and Freddie out of conservatorship, you change the basis of how the mortgage market in the United States is going to operate. We're gonna when this happens, most of the Dodd-Frank responsibility, the changes to the Dodd-Frank capital rules are going to go away, because Fannie and Freddie will no longer be constrained by that stuff as in that respect. This is what's being fought so fucking hard. I firmly believe that that stopping the Clarity Act and stopping Fannie and Freddie IPO are two of the subplots to the Democrats' disastrous shutdown. Because at that point, then all those mortgage-backed securities that are on the Fed's balance sheet, there may be a market for them again.
Right.
And if so, then the Fed can naturally allow them to roll. They're not going to just roll them off the balance sheet. They may be able to actually sell them into the market.
Right.
And if so, the Fed can start the process of actually deleveraging the size of its balance sheet that way. And that's why he's ending quote unquote QT, because the market may wind up being the next phase of QT. And by doing that, okay, and again, this is nascent, so I may have some of this wrong. I'm now throwing this stuff out there for people to chew on, including yourself and the people listening. Then the next phase of this is as follows, which is, what did Powell do at the last meeting? He did exactly what I hoped he would do, which is to throw a little bit of ambiguity into the market by saying, I may be done cutting rates, when everybody was assuming that he was done, that he wasn't done
Yeah.
cutting. that he
Yeah.
wasn't. What I wanted him to do was, I don't believe for a second he's not going to cut 25 basis points in December.
Right.
Don't, that's not the point. The point is to now stop holding the market's hand.
Yeah.
That's what he has to do on his way out the door, because
Right.
he has to set the table for the next Fed chair to be able to find their decision space and define and start to define the market, start to define the communication space as well. So he's starting the process of doing exactly the thing that Powell doesn't do, which is hold the market's hand, which he's
Right.
done since COVID.
Right. Right.
Even
So
though he almost always at Jackson Hole makes a major policy decision, which is a right turn.
Right.
That the market wasn't expecting, like getting rid of the 2% inflation target rule.
Okay.
Which was
which
was a terrible thing, and I'm glad he did. The 2% inflation was terrible. It was always a bad.
Well, that's because of FAIT. They had a rule that they changed. I'm not excusing him, but they had this F for financial average inflation target, and so you could say the idea was we're going to average 2%. It's okay to be at 3%. Because we'll be at 1% and on average will be at 2%. And so that what that does is immediately gives you more latitude on the yield curve, not yield curve, on your time frame. And so what they abandoned the 2% target this year when they abandoned FAIT. They didn't say that. But I want to ask you a question about a phrase that you use so I can understand what you're talking about a little bit better. One of the first things you said in this new idea that you're talking about is the Fed ends QT. And you implied that it would be replaced by something else. There is a market for these securities.
Yeah.
Okay. So are you saying that there's going to be, I don't understand that. So he's going to end QT because he recognizes there'll be another buyer for
he doesn't have right because what is QT? QT is just allowing these things to mature and then not rebuying them and shrinking the balance sheet that way.
Right.
What if he shrinks the balance sheet by actually having marketable securities again? That's not QT. That's not QT.
No, where the Fannie and Freddie come from is what you're saying.
Yeah, and when Fannie and Freddie come back onto the market, and I don't understand, I don't necessarily know the mechanism for this or whatnot, but as I was doing some work yesterday, and it was starting to pop it, and then something really started to shake out of this. That there's going to be there's a potential here that you're going to unfuck the mortgage market that was seized during the 2008 financial crisis.
Okay, hold on. So during the great financial crisis and COVID, but during the great financial crisis, because this is about the mortgage backs, right? We essentially commandeered the mortgage market. We captured it. We prevented it from having free market price discovery. And that has been under lock and key for a decade now, essentially, right?
Almost two.
Right. Almost two. Right. Exactly. Right. Wow. Right. Because he didn't sell any mortgage backs. He's just waiting for them to expire.
He has sold some, by the way.
No. I'm with you. I'm not going to backtrack. So essentially what you're potentially contending, what you're thinking about now is he can afford to stop QT, and he may have to stop QT anyway, but he can afford to stop QT because the mortgage-backed market will be marketized again. And the market will set the price, and that will take care of the QT for him, is what you're saying.
Yes, that's kind of what I'm saying. And if he sells these things into the marketplace then we finally actually get the mark to market on some of these. We get a mark to market on some of these mortgage-backed securities and some of these things. And here's the thing that I think everybody's missing. Who gets fucked in that?
I don't know. You're going to tell me that you can. I'm going to say yes, but I don't know why.
No, I think it's private equity.
So it's not UK? How does private equity get
fucked? I mean, private equity is like they're the ones that we had to protect here.
I'm not challenging. I don't know.
And I'm just saying. I'm thinking to myself,
with all the fucking bonds underwater. Right. They're the ones who've been bailed out because their bonds. Right. Exactly.
Okay. And remember, this is so when you start to like put all this together, like, why are they fighting so fucking hard to stop Fannie and Freddie from coming out of conservatorship? Right. Why are they fighting this?
They're being lobbied by private equity. They're being lobbied by private equity.
Because here's what I think is coming. and this is to wrap this up and why the inciting incident for this podcast was our conversation the other day.
Right, right. But we're going down some good rabbit holes here.
The denouement for this is where I'm going, which is Trump and the 50-year mortgage and this quote unquote great American mortgage company.
Right.
What I'm postulating now is that they're fighting the recapitalization of the middle class because the kulaks need to be destroyed as opposed to recapitalized. Right. So freaking hard. And I think that what Trump is targeting and why he's started the process of yelling at Powell about lower rates, he's not lower goddamn rates, get that 11%. Why? Because he wants to sell mortgages to starter homes that are getting built in these places where there are factories that they're putting in place, and all of this reindustrialization.
Right.
He wants to put people like my daughter into $200,000 starter homes at 3% for 50 years.
Right, because right.
That is how two kids making 16 to 17 bucks an hour in average freaking jobs for 5 years, they can afford that house. He'll become an electrician. He'll go from an electrician's apprentice to, the journeyman. He'll be able to start charging 30, 35 bucks an hour. She can go stay at home, raise a couple of rugrats. They can start the American dream.
It's the proper reindustrialization of America. It's not the fucking data center AI bullshit.
Right. It's and that is going to be a below market rate mortgage while private equity gets fucked and has to pay a higher cost of capital to recapitalize the fucking kids. He's going to steal the money that they stole back from them, which is exactly has been planned for every one of these fucking trade deals where he said, not only are you going to eat the fucking tariff, but you're going to pay me a market access charge to get my fucking money back that you stole from my fucking people. And so you're going to put that money into our fucking economy, you Saudi goddamn sons of bitches, or you fucking Korean bastards, or you fucking French motherfuckers, and you're going to pay us back the money you stole from us. And he's going to do the same thing to private equity.
Wait. I want to. All right, hold on.
That's the thing that everybody is missing.
I'm not derailing you on this, but I just want to. You're saying, first of all, I want the focal point is the 50-year mortgage.
My point is about private equity. If they have to pay a higher cost of capital for their rental properties and their commercial real estate space and everything else, they're going to pay a higher friggin' tax rate, which is going to put more money in the friggin' coffers of the federal government. And he's going to use the tax money to subsidize the friggin' mortgages to the kids.
Your contention
and all the ICE agents that were signing up at $70,000 a month to kick out all the H-1Bs and all the the cartel guys. Right, and they're all going to get houses at a subsidized rate.
No,
then I know where his plan. I know where his plan goes from there, and it's even more obnoxious, and it's literally making every banker in the square mile freak the fuck right out.
Because what's that?
No, it's simple. That GMAC or the MAGA or whatever you call it goes global and starts writing mortgages in fucking Alberta, in fucking the Midlands, in fucking Ireland, in fucking Australia.
That's stable coins.
Bingo.
That's stable coins. All right. So wait, I'm not, I'm just trying to, I want to put this in English to make sure I got it right again. All right. So first of all, I have shit all over the 50-year mortgage because it's easy to do. And I understand there are major problems. The joke basically is like, I'm gonna take a 15-year mortgage on my car, and these are all good things, and it's the antithesis of a country. And I want to say this before I come on your side of the table. It's the antithesis of a country that's deleveraging. They're basically kicking down the road things more. Now we all know that, and that's the meme, and that's the joke, and I'm with you. But that is, I'm with them. People who say that, and I'm there. But if you're trying to. I'm just I'm doing an AI synopsis of what you said without the emotion. If you're trying to rebuild your middle class, you have to give them a fair chance. And that would be not unlike what Roosevelt did by inventing a 30-year mortgage. So, during the Great Depression, there were no mortgages. And I'm not saying we didn't go crazy with homeownership, but during the Great Depression, there were no mortgages. Nobody could afford a home. You were poor. And so they started the mortgage program with a 1 year or a 2 year. And then they went out to 5 year. And then they went out to 30 year quickly thereafter. And they developed, this is to your point about the mortgage-backed securities, market being refurbished. This is not a new idea. I mean, as cool as it is, and I'm saying this to give you confirmation, it's not a brand new idea.
No.
This is what Roosevelt, this is what they did. They
Mhm.
created a mortgage market to help there become a middle class, to give them jobs. So back then they could afford a Sears catalog home or in Chicago or whatever it is. And so over time, the market worked its way out on the curve. And by the way, it worked out pretty quickly. So during this time frame, what happened? Money was taken from oligarchs to support the potentially growing middle class. And so you created home ownership, and that was the engine of the economy. Now, fast forward to today, and believe me, I'm just thinking out loud here along your lines. I'm being your analyst for this part of the conversation. So today, okay, it sucks to go from a 30-year to a 50-year. It really only saves $300, yada, yada, yada. Macro, it's going to drive the price of homes up. I get that. I get that. But if you do it in a way where uh, you simultaneously say to the private equity people, and by the way, this is what the government does. We bailed you out in the great financial crisis. Now it's your time to pay us back a little
Right.
bit, right? Not even get into the geopolitics of it. And so you're going to take a haircut on the money that we've been giving you. And that haircut will come in the fact that mortgage-backed securities are going to float publicly at a depressed level. However, we have a new generation of people that need to have a little help. Your daughter, Gen Z. And so we're going to subsidize mortgages so they can buy fucking starter homes. Everyone's going to build, everyone's going to work, everyone's going to have a place to live and we'll have stability. That's my
And
story.
here's the thing.
Right.
Is anybody really not on a 50-year mortgage?
Oh, yeah. Who fucking pays off their mortgage? Exactly.
Like you take your starter home mortgage and you have it for 10 years where you're built. Here's the thing. Our entire tax system that was designed by the British to destroy our fucking country was designed to take a maximal amount of money out of the hands of young people as early as possible so that they cannot generate wealth.
Right.
Social Security is a fucking pay-as-you-go death tax.
Right.
12% of your income goes into a fucking thing, goes into the worst investment of all fucking time. I did this math the other day.
No, wait, you're going to do this math. This is our conversation. Wait, before you do that, because that's the way to end this. That's the way to end this. The whole like the
okay,
just,
wait. I know, but I'm going to Social Security plus the insurance plus now Obamacare raising the cost of insurance plus education plus this plus that, all of this, and you made it such that I had to put 20% down in order to get a 30-year mortgage that wasn't a 5-year balloon. Because that's what the banks say. That's what the British actually want. They want us all on 30-year amortizations with a 5-year adjustable rate balloon so that they can then turn around every 4 years and engineer a goddamn financial crisis where you have to refi at a higher goddamn rate. You sell me the loan at 1%, and then 4 years later, you kick it up to 8%. That's what they're doing to the freaking people in the UK right now. These fucking people. They've done it 100 times. There's a downturn of a major. Go back over the entire Eurodollar system, going back to 1971, 4.7 years. There is some kind of major market seizure. Long-term capital management, 9/11, this, that, all of them. It's every 4.5 fucking years.
Right.
And guess what? The banks don't want to really lend you an unsecured. And I get why the banks don't want to do a more than a 5-year note on a house. I get it. Their term risk sucks.
Right.
I get it. But here's the thing. That's why the government sponsored 30-year mortgage works. You pay a little bit extra up front. You pool the capital, you pool the risk, you sell the risk off in the mortgage-backed security market to everybody who wants stable cash flow, and everybody gets a piece of that risk over time. And you spread the risk around. And you go from 393 banking in a 30-year mortgage market to 363 banking or 353 banking. That's the way that works. Now, the 50-year is just a signal to how fucked we are and how far out of balance wages and asset prices are. We can either let asset prices drop 50% and then everybody's and then I'm not we're not doing gold, goats, and guns here. Well, we are, but I'm substituting gold for goldfish because people need to fucking eat.
Right. Right.
Like, where if I could come up with a G for toilet paper, like what would I actually be, like at the end of the day, what's your savings? It's not gold. Gold in
Right.
that scenario it doesn't do you any good. You need
No, you need
bullets.
to, right. You
You
can't
need
grow with
you need
gold. Right.
bullets and canned sardines. So we
Right.
don't want that. We don't want any more societal implosion. What we want is a stabilization of society
Right.
and civilization, and then
Right.
build on whatever's left. And yes, the pricing level sucks, but we can work that out. So
Right.
transfer the wealth back from the oligarch class back to the kulaks who have been fucking destroyed, and start the process and start the recapitalization
Well,
process. That's what Trump is doing. And it's
but
very obvious. And every day that fucking graper motherfucker, Nick Fuentes, goes out there and screams, MAGA is dead, he's full of shit, and he's a British fucking asset. Bite me, bro. Fuck off. That's what's going on. That's what we're dealing with. Hell, I'm at the point where I want to accuse Tucker Carlson of this. That's how angry I am. And I say all of this because the reason I get so fucking angry about this, the reason why why I drip with vitriol at these fucking people, officially known as TFP, is because
right.
I don't want my daughter to live in their fucking world anymore. I lived through their world. You
Yeah.
lived through the world, Vince.
Yeah.
We before we even started recording this podcast today, we stopped and had a long conversation
We
about.
talked for an hour before we started.
Yeah, before we even started, about our friggin' family histories and all the shit that we both went through, and basically outlining each other's childhood PTSD to each other.
Right.
Got news for you. That's Gen X's ethos, and they know goddamn well that if you put those hard-bitten motherfuckers in charge of fixing this system, they all fucking hang from lampposts, because we know what they did to us.
This is fucking fascinating. All right, so
that's my psychology, folks.
I want to say,
if you want to know what I've been yelling, what I yelled at my therapist for 4 years, there you go.
Your ex-therapist, the one that has a restraining order.
Ex-therapist.
Your restraining order. There's wait. I want to go back to the beginning before you took it.
I'm sorry.
I just want to address people from a macroeconomic point of view.
Sure.
I'm going to give you the 50-year mortgage is the extend and pretend negativity. But the positive side of it, macroeconomically, is this. 15 years ago, give or take, the average homeowner, the average time frame that someone stayed in a home was 7 years. Now the average time frame of a homeowner is 12 years, and it's going up. And that's because people, because of their house poor or house rich, however you look at it, they can't afford to move. They're staying there. And you know what? You can mathematically justify longer term mortgages if people are scared to move to begin with. So I think that's really, it's mathematically, I mean, look, I understand the extend and pretend thing, but, I'm a zealot on that. But if it's done wrong, it becomes extend and pretend. But if it's done right, if the things that Tom thinks is going to happen, then all you're really doing is you're saying, all right, we're doing another post. We're in a depression in areas that we're not discussing publicly, and this is a way to not extend and pretend, but to add time, because people need more time, and people are living longer, and retirement ages will go up. But you know what? We actually, if it's done right, it does help the next generation, which will help our country. One of the things that China has done right, I'm going to finish. One of the things that China has done right is it has nurtured a middle class. And having done that, eventually they'll fucking kill their middle class with taxes. But right now they're nurturing it. We've killed our middle class at the Gen X level with taxes, and the older millennials with taxes. Now we have to grow a new crop. And I think this is where you might be right.
And I'm gonna take it one step further. Oh God, oh shit. Yes, no, you're right about that. The other thing is, I need people to understand, and it really bothers me. But we're all the people who are making these arguments about, well, it's only $200 a month, it's only this, it's only this, it's only that. So I said to you the other day on Twitter, as I pinged you and needled you a little bit,
right?
Stop thinking about a guy who's comfortable and has got assets and is in the high income portion of his earnings curve. You have to think like somebody making $2,000 a month,
right?
Take home pay. Okay, $200 is everything.
Right.
$200 is an enormous amount of money. Okay, it is the difference between eating and not eating. It's the difference between being able to afford your health insurance, your employer offered health insurance premium, and not being able to afford it. Now, I don't think health insurance for 20-year-olds is a smart idea. I don't think you should pay. I think it's bad. I can take this from experience because I did exactly that. It's overpaying for health insurance for my wife who has really bad allergies, and I spent all that time with my dad's ethos of having the safety nets in place for her,
Right.
and to prove to her that I cared. That was a mistake. It was bad fiscal management. I should have taken that money and stuffed it in a fucking, stuffed it in an IRA and let it grow, and I wouldn't have that problem today. I wouldn't have some of the
Self-insuring young
problems that I have
kids.
today. But what I'm getting at is that money, you have to get as much cash flow off the table as possible. And think about what Pulte just put out this week. We can explore portable mortgages, that you can take the terms of your mortgage. If it's an FHA mortgage and you're going from one FHA mortgage to another FHA mortgage against a different fucking property, you can take your term with you. So when you trade up from the starter home to the higher,
Right.
the bigger home, with because you've
Right.
got
Your
3 kids
mortgage
now,
goes with you. Right.
and your mortgage goes with you, and we readjust the terms based on the selling price of the house and everything else, but the terms go with you.
Right.
If it's there to your advantage. And
Well,
that, and you know what that does?
he's
That takes
encouraging
away.
homeowners to move. Right.
Think about, yeah. Well, this is two things. And then again, we don't want people moving. We want people in stable jobs, building stable communities. We're all deracinated.
Right.
Okay. So what is the British Empire's, or the remnant of the British Empire's, real fucking superpower? The ability to manipulate the cost of money through currency arbitrage and yield and bond market manipulation. If you put people on a 50-year fixed note that's portable, you can't fuck them.
Right. Well, that you're define it. Right. You're using a 50-year mortgage that's locked in. There's no financialization other than that.
You have now given people stable cash flow. You've given the insurance companies stable cash flow. And this is why they don't need the credit agency model to decide on how they're going to fuck you on the rate.
Right.
They're going to assetize. You're going to be able to bring your proper assets to the table. When the day they turn around and say, I have never been able to use my gold and silver assets as a negotiating tool and a leverage point with a debt.
That's right.
With a debt issuer ever, and I've been gold rich and cash poor since 2007, folks.
And if you were Chinese, you'd be able to
income.
do that now. And if you were Chinese, you'd be able to do that now. Same
Right.
idea. Right.
Yeah,
We
same
can't
thing.
monetize
So Besant's
our
talking about
metals unless we sell.
Bitcoin because he wants to use Bitcoin as the collateral by which he wants to unlock all that collateral.
Right.
He wants to unlock that and give that, and you can use that as,
Right.
I mean, and the same thing is Dodd-Frank has destroyed our ability as small business owners to use our cash flow and our profit margins as a basis by which to get a fucking loan. I've just literally signed the closing papers yesterday with Wells goddamn Fargo, who fucking treated me like a goddamn criminal for 4 months in underwriting because I did a little tax. I have a structures designed to avoid paying $70,000 a year in fucking taxes.
Right.
And that was designed by the fucking British in Dodd-Frank after the goddamn great financial crisis that they fucking engineered.
Yeah.
To nationalize the mortgage market, fuck it up, put it in the goddamn conservatorship, lock it away, and pay for Obamacare. Fuck these people. It's bullshit. All this needs to end. Every goddamn bit of it. And that's why they shut the government down for no reason for 40 days. They got exactly what they wanted. They extended and pretended their bullshit system for another 40 days to try and get Trump into the new year so that they can steal the freaking country during the midterms, impeach him, put us all in fucking jail, and continue liquidating the kulaks like they're doing right now in Ireland, the UK, Canada, and Australia. The rest of the Commonwealth is getting liquidated, folks. It's right in front of your eyes. And I'm like, no, absolutely not. No, we beat these people here, or we all go gently into that good night. And everybody who's telling me that it's not the goddamn British, fuck you, you're wrong. Done. Over it. I don't care. I don't even care if I'm right wholly about this and it's bigger than that. Great, fine. I don't give a shit. No one wants to believe that I'm right about this. So therefore, I'm going to keep pounding it through your fucking goddamn stupid pie holes until you get it through your freaking head. And then we can start talking nuance. Then we can start talking about, how much of it is the Dutch, or how much of it is the French, or how much is the Jews, or how much is the Venetians, or then we can have that conversation. But until you like deal with the 800-pound gorilla in the room and in the square mile, you're not having a conversation about this stuff. Sorry, Vince. I had to let that out because this is necessary. This is our messaging for 2026. We have to be on point about the messaging because this is the only way we get out of this. It's so very important. It starts with what you talked about on Thursday on the other day. The inciting incident, how to create a bond market that's collateralized with gold that cuts these people out. But this is the end game of that. This is how we create a stable system that recapitalizes the kulaks, which are you and me, or our kids.
No. You know, it's funny. You said the only thing original that I wanted to pop into my head was when you said, oh fuck. It made me think of something. If the right-hand side of the aisle, call it conservative, call it Republican, does what needs to be done, whether it be leftist or rightist, meaning what an FDR did to stabilize the middle class, to grow the middle class, and you help these people, meaning the kids, economically, you really undermine the whole progressive commie left that captures the imagination of kids and makes them think Mamdami's a hero when all he really is a crybaby. He doesn't want to do anything about it. And he's kind of like the modern Al Sharpton,
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
And monetizes it. And if we were to do something economically for these kids, Gen Z would grow up to be fucking normal economically.
Yes. They're being asked to choose between the false divide of Mamdani style communism or Fuente style fascism. That's what they're talking. That's what they're accelerationism. That is the fault. That's if you're not for Mamdani, then you have to be for this guy. And everybody in the middle, no, we can't have that. They shot the guy in the middle. They killed him live on national television. His name was Charlie Kirk.
Right.
I don't care who Tyler Robinson was working for or this or that or anything else. It doesn't matter if it was stochastic or directed, but Charlie Kirk getting shot was the incident that was the image system that they needed to let us know that we're not supposed to have any hope.
Even backing off that, but agreeing with it, even if they didn't literally plan to kill him, they didn't sell the murderer up the river, but they handed him the gun to do it.
Exactly.
they handed him the oar. They gave him the boat for free. Something like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You create the zeitgeist. And then you just wait for the thing to happen.
Well, to show you,
it doesn't have to be a movie script, folks. It can just be chaos.
Right.
And then you capitalize on the chaos when the chaos happens. Dexter White will be very, very glad to hear me actually make this argument, even though I'm not even sure I believe it. But I'm willing to make the argument.
What?
He
opportunity and chaos.
Tells me that I spend too much time doing direct correlation and I'm a good storyteller. So therefore I can craft story beats.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not a story. Sometimes the shit just happons. History still is just a bunch of shit that happened, right?
So I'm with Dexter on this. And here's what I mean.
That's fine. And that's fine. I'm willing to go.
But that's why we talk. Why we talk. Like,
well, no, the other thing is I'm willing to entertain both sides of it.
Right.
But we'll let it play out, and then we'll see where we wind up. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. What matters is once you understand the actual framework of what's happening, now you can start mapping who works for who by how they react when these things occur. That's why Marjorie Taylor Greene is crashing out. That's why Candace Owens is crashing out. That's why this one's crashing out. That's why that's happening. That's why they're attacking this.
I wonder who the next flavor will be after that. You know what I mean? Like,
and I'm watching it all play out, and it's like, okay, folks, you're not, because you don't get it, and it's why it's important, Vince, that you and I are two halves of the same brain in this respect. Right.
No. It's the opportunity and chaos thing is why I focused on what you said, because the Chinese character for I'm going to say this mistakenly. The Chinese character for chaos is the Chinese character for opportunity. Now, the truth of it is, it's the same character. So what that character really means is from chaos comes opportunity. That's what that character means. And so I guess I'm taking the Dexter side on this, and that is I don't think, and I'm going to be the dialectic synthesis between you and Dexter on this. I don't think that they have a plan from A to B, from A to Z, but they have a path. But they know what they want to do if there's ever a crisis and ever at any juncture, you know.
Pull
And
plan R off the shelf and execute.
exactly. So like for example, economically, the U.S. is like, well, we need to have people stop selling treasuries. How are we going to do that? Well, let's cut bilateral deals. That's plan A. Let's plan B. Let's add stable coins. We can always nuke them if we have to. Plan C is we'll throw a little gold in there. Like these are all the plans. Oh, and if the president or some important political figure dies, what do we do? Well, that'll be a chaotic moment. We can insert this. Yeah, it's chaos from
Okay.
opportunity. It's
But you
opportunity
see,
from chaos.
I know, and I agree. I think a lot of it is that, but I do fundamentally believe this is part of the reason why, one of the reasons why I was so very good in my former um, life as a chemist and as a researcher and as a thing. I'm a root cause analysis kind of guy,
Right,
meaning I can look at all the confounding variables and I go, that's the one, that's the biggest problem. We need to fix that. We fix that. We fix these things.
right,
What I'm getting at is that my superpower, if I have one, is to go where there is direction is by taking all of the chaos and distilling it down to in this system. Because when you deal with, with real chemistry, right?
entropy and shit
High
like
energy
that.
chemistry. There's
Yeah,
I've told the story 1,000 times. At one point when I was working on the nickel boron project, I literally mapped out every potential reaction and side reaction on an 8x4 whiteboard with the Gibbs free energy numbers for every one of these reactions. There's like 40 of them, and I had it
right,
up board, and I got done with it. My boss walked in that day, and he just loves shit like this, and he just like pulled out his phone and took a picture of it.
right,
And like, because you're gonna, he's like, because you're gonna wipe that, you're gonna get rid of that one day. I'm like, but at the end of the day, being able to look at all that chaos and go, but that is the thing that's driving all of this, and why?
right,
Because this, and this, and so it, it's both simplification of chaos of a chaotic dynamic system and an acknowledgement that a lot of this is still also beyond their control. That's why I like to call it a Gantt chart, a Microsoft project file, because you can move shit around in the Gantt chart, but
right,
the basic events can
right.
still be can
That's
still
funny. It's funny because my your I see what you're talking about the what's it called? Not proximate cause. Would you call it? The word cause was in your title.
um the causality or causation correlation and
It was like
causality.
it was like antecedent cause or core cause or something like that.
The yeah,
No, but I get it. Like when it comes to you can boil it down to the like this is where the heat is applied. That's
mhm,
your endothermic reaction, like this is where it goes right here. For me, it's a conditional probability. So
mhm.
for
Same
example,
thing.
we talk about it's Bayesian probabilities, right? We
Yes.
talk about like you'll say, I'm not you'll say, but I'll just say what I say. I say that there are multiple paths, infinite paths from here to there, and they all want to get to there, and that's their intention. That's the cui bono part that you talk about. And then at every node, there's going to be a decision, and there's always the chaotic node. But here's the thing. Here's why it becomes easier. If you get it right in the beginning, eventually the conditional probabilities narrow, and you have coming out the other end, you have less paths. So
Right.
it's the end game in chess. You can really only do two things. You can either move left or move right or lose if it's like a king versus another king
Right.
and queen. So
What they really love is permanent mid game.
yeah,
What
permanent mid game. That's
they
right.
like permanent mid game where
Yeah,
and Trump in his way is keeps going out there and going, no, we're moving to end game. No, we're
yeah,
moving to end
that's
game. I've
right.
been saying this for a long time now. I used to chess is a great example of permanent mid game where you tie the board up like this.
You
I
know
used to
what's
play.
wait, hold on. Let me just throw this in there. Do you know what the English opening is called? Why it's called the
No,
English opening?
no.
The English opening is it looks like the Sicilian. You've got the
I don't know anything about chess, dude. So
Okay, so the
I
English
can't tell
Opening.
chess
All right, then let me
terminology.
just describe what the English Opening
Sure.
does, because then you can go back into what you're saying. The English Opening is a version of a chess opening that has an incredibly slow opening,
Hmm.
an incredibly cluttered board that has a chaotic, that's the word, a chaotic mid game
Yep.
that never ends. I'm serious.
Yeah.
That's
No, that is literally the British mindset. I used
anyone who
to.
knows chess, that's the English Opening.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I never played chess, but I used to play a game, used to play a collectible card game called Shadowfist. And we were, and when we played Shadowfist, we had 5 people at the table, and you had to know, you had all these Bayesian probability fields of what his decision space was with his, and your
Right,
goal was to win on your turn. And if you couldn't win, and if you did your math, looking at your cards and looking at the state, the board state, you're like, okay, I can't win this turn, but I have to now prevent everybody else from winning
right,
so that I can get back to my turn, so that I can draw a new hand of cards and I can try and win again.
right,
And
right,
if everybody played with that impulse, you wound up with this game that pushed right the mid game and then stayed there in this beautiful kind of temporary 5-player melange of tension.
right,
And I described that. I loved that. I
right,
absolutely adore the puzzle that represented.
right.
And I would explain that and would say that to some of my other gaming friends who were much more linear, and they're like, "Oh my god, that sounds like torture." I'm like, "No, it was gorgeous because you could step back and go, damn, that was a great play. Yeah, that was a really great play." And
Right.
then you could like go
You're
back over.
observing the system. You're
I'm
observing the
observing the
system.
system.
Yeah.
He wanted all he wanted to do was win, and he just wanted it over and done with. If he couldn't win that game, then let's move on
Right.
to the next one.
Right. It was a
And
sociological experiment for you.
oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
That's good.
and that's why that's why at a 5-player level I had a 60% win rate when I should have had a 20% win rate.
Right. Right.
But
That's interesting.
I knew my opponents. I knew what they were playing. I knew everything, and then I knew how to twist the knife, and I could literally like
Once you
move
found out their
cards.
motivations with the Cui Bono thing. Right.
And once
Right.
and in that game, because you could attack anywhere you wanted, really, you're like, I'm going to do that. And I knew I made the right move when everybody around the table went, God damn it.
It hurt everyone.
Because everybody was like, now what do we do? And
Right.
he's like, how did you do? How did you know? Of course I knew what to do. As some of it is you learn through repetition, you make mistakes, you
Right.
try things, they don't work, you bluff, you do this, you do that.
But
You
it's the approach of boiling it down. It's like
yeah,
a Venn diagram. What do you
yeah.
call it? Again, I keep coming back to that
It's
phrase.
a Bayesian probability fields. It really is.
No, but I mean that's my words. Your words were very
Decision space.
chemistry oriented.
It's well, and it's also activation energy
And it
gives
was
free
root
energy.
cause. It was like root cause
Root cause. Mhm. So
commonality.
you have to think about what's their path to victory. What's their path to victory? What can they
Right.
use to do? What assets do they have in play? And this is how we analyze geopolitics. And this is how and honestly, you can do the same thing with markets. But you do that because you understand. You do a lot of that because but you do it from the plumbing perspective. You do it from the
Right.
trader's perspective. I don't. I don't. I do it from the
The plumbing
you
of
know.
geopolitics. That's what it
Yes.
is. It's the
Yes.
plumbing of geopolitics.
Yeah. So I mean, when I'm what we've gotten to in this podcast is that you can understand. I think that the point of this is that the table is set to pull us out of this messy mid game, and what you're seeing is that Trump is trying to push absolutely towards end game, and the British and the old Anglo-Dutch, British, whatever you want to call it, are trying to keep pushing us back into a mid game that they have already lost because it's not a 2-player game.
Right.
No matter what happens here, if you look at this as a 4-player game, right? The way I look at it is 3 of the players at the table have decided they can't win.
Right.
And it doesn't matter who actually wins the game, but if we take
Right.
them out, it's now a 3-player game.
Right.
And
And
we
even
can
in
at a
gamesmanship,
stable.
it just works that way because everyone's going to shit on the guy. Europe's got to play a defensive game, which means to make sure the war never ends.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. So this is like Risk, and you've got, they've got, they got a beachhead into
Maybe Putin will die. Let's keep playing the game.
Yeah. How can we keep doing? How can we keep playing? Yeah.
That's right.
And we're saying that's enough.
Awesome.
And here's the thing. They could have, and I do firmly believe that Trump went and accepted the second state visit to the king, which was the big deal. But then that fucking tracksuit midget Zelensky's met with the king 3 times.
Right.
That Trump went there and said, look, these are the terms of surrender. And we can live happily ever after.
Right.
And either the king, my friend Ian Burlingame would say the king accepted, but he's in no position to actually enforce it. That may be his, generous read as a royalist. That's fine. My other, the non-generous read was Trump was rejected. Nope, we're going to fight it all the way out to the end.
Right.
And now it's like a game of Go between a master and an apprentice. The master has offered the apprentice the face-saving move of saying, we put 20 stones on the board. You're going to take this. I'm going to take this. You're going to take this. I'm going to win by 7. Shall we play again? And the apprentice says, no, I think I can. And then the apprentice winds up fighting it all the way out and losing by 30.
Right.
You're going to get a better deal today. If you keep fighting, it's going to be a worse deal tomorrow. It's going to be a worse deal tomorrow. It's going to be a worse deal tomorrow. That's what I think is happening. And your insight into the structure of the bond
what we started with.
What we started with is the linchpin to understanding how that deal keeps getting worse for Europe.
Well,
that's why I was so hot to do this podcast today, Vince.
Right. I know. I mean, we had a lot of fun doing it. The economic net. I mean, I'm going to sit inside the king's point of view for a second here.
Sure.
The economic net is closing around him for all the reasons we're discussing. So all he can do is bide for time and hope that Trump's popularity drops enough that he becomes less potent, and hope for the next president.
That's their extended pretend game. And then at the same time, burn down all the rest of the Commonwealth so it's not worth taking over. It's they're literally burning Canada to the ground. They're burning England to the ground. They're burning Ireland to the ground. They're burning Australia to the ground. And they're saying, you cannot, if you want to win this war, fine, you will get nothing in the process.
So like scorched earth is what you're saying.
Yes, that's absolutely
scorched or negligent earth. Scorched negligence. I don't know.
Well, think about the British Columbian court ruling that gives Aboriginal title over fee simple title in Canada. Like they're going to steal the land of all these British Columbians.
Yeah, they're tripling down on wokeism right now.
Yes.
Yeah, ideology. They're ideologically tripling down.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Nope, you are exactly correct.
It's true. All right.
So, all right. I think we've probably covered it all, because I've had my cathartic rant that,
I don't think these rants are cathartic, Tom. I don't think when we get done them, you and I go to our neutral corners and say, "Oh, was it good for you?" No, it's more like I go to my neutral corner and say, "There's someone I need to punch in the face now," And I'm sure you call up Wells Fargo and say, "Listen, you fuckers, get my fucking paperwork in order." Anyway, they should be your sponsor, Wells Fargo, after this. This was fun. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, absolutely, man. This has been a blast, and we will do it again, of course, as always.
Okay.
Thank you, man. All right, so he's Soren the K on Twitter and VBL's Gold Fix on Substack, as well as I'm TFL1728 on Twitter and Gold Goats and Guns on Patreon. You guys know the drill. Be well. Talk soon.
You're supposed to say something about the hockey puck thing, right?
Keep your stick on the ice.
Yeah.